Thomas Edison, a guy who invented the light bulb and phonograph, along with Henry Ford, a guy who invented the automobiles. This footage seen here from 1914, where Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and John Burroughs camping out in the Everglades. Thomas Edison and Henry Ford, side by side, the best of friends. Edison works in his laboratory across the street from his winter home. He loves testing out Henry Ford's vehicle and going on a ride. The person who owns Ford Motor Company is none other than Henry Ford. And yes, it is true that Edison and Ford is really side by side. Boy, that's a look at a history where Thomas Edison and Henry Ford loved going to Southwest Florida in the wintertime, even the Everglades. Next up, we will look at their winter homes of Thomas Edison and Henry Ford in this beautiful community of Fort Myers. This is where they reside in the 20th century. All this and more next on Around Florida. Florida, the Sunshine State of the United States of America. Filled with history and excitement. It has 3 largest cities and some large cities, and even tourist spots. And this state also has some history to it, and some famous landmark buildings, and winter homes, and everywhere you go, which is filled of surprises. And around you, you'll enjoy the best time in the Sunshine State in Around Florida. Today's Around Florida, we will be exploring the Edison Ford Winter Estates in Fort Myers. Hi there. Welcome again to Around Florida. Here I am in Edison Ford Winter Estates in Fort Myers, a community in Southwest Florida located north of Naples and Bonita Springs. Well, today we're going to look at the homes of Thomas Edison and Henry Ford, winter homes to be exact. And we're going to look at Thomas Edison's lab, and we're going to look at all of its artifacts related to Thomas Edison and the automobiles of Henry Ford. And of course, we will include the history of this attraction here in Florida. And we're going to have a good time here at Edison Ford Winter Estates. So, let's get started. Fort Myers. City on the government seat of Lee County in Southwest Florida. Located just north of Naples and Bonita Springs. Wow. Check out that water tower of the IMAG History and Science Center of Fort Myers. The government buildings of Lee County. We're heading down Tamiami Trail, that's US 41. And after driving past the government offices of Fort Myers and passing I-75, we drive down the road past Tamiami Trail to McGregor Boulevard to the entrance to Edison Ford Winter Estates. This is what Around Florida is bringing us to explore the winter homes of Thomas Edison and Henry Ford. Edison Ford Winter Estates opened to the public in 1947 for Edison's winter home, and Ford's home opened to the public in 1990. As we entered this attraction, here's a look at the footages from the 1980s to early 1990s. These footages are from the late 1980s to early 1990s of Edison Ford's Winter Estates. Prior to 1990, when Henry Ford's winter home opened to the public, they toured the Edison home and the guest home and the gardens. And, of course, when Henry Ford's winter home opened to the public in 1990, they called the attraction Edison Ford Winter Estates. Back then, when they purchased tickets, they toured the attraction with the group as they walked down north of McGregor Boulevard, that's across the street, to visit the winter homes of Thomas Edison and Henry Ford. Wow, these footages really take us back to the good old days. They tour Edison's home and Ford's home, and the swimming pool and the office and Ford's garage. After they toured the winter homes, they walked back and toured Edison's lab. And then after that, they concluded the tour at the museum, which of course these artifacts are still here today. And when they exit the museum, they head into the gift shop. Boy, when they visited Fort Myers, they love coming here to Edison Ford Winter Estates, a popular tourist attraction in the state of Florida. And wow, even the banyan trees and gardens are still here today. Today, the attraction's format has now changed so that after purchasing tickets, you are now allowed to come and go to the museum in Edison's lab as you please. Now we're driving up to the entrance to Edison Ford Winter Estates. And as you can see, the building remained unchanged, and so are the banyan trees, though some of which were destroyed a bit by hurricanes. And now that we purchased our tickets, we begin at the Museum of Edison Ford Winter Estates. Now that you are allowed to come and go as you please, with museum admission purchase. Here in the museum, you'll find treasures of Thomas Edison and Henry Ford. It houses the Henry Ford's classic vehicles of the 1900s. This display, seen here, welcomes everyone to the museum. Thomas Edison and Henry Ford are the best of friends, side by side. Henry Ford has lots of automobiles, as he invented the greatest vehicles by Ford Motor Company. And wow, he does the job. Thomas Edison, on the other hand, is interests in electricity, light bulbs, and other sorts of electricity related. This display, which shows Henry Ford's collection, seen here, as he is interested in music. Music is one of Henry Ford's favorite hobby. Thomas Edison loves making machines that shows motion pictures back in the good old days with the motion picture vending machine, where you insert a nickel into the machine, turn the crank, and see the movie through the viewfinder. Just like in those good old mutoscope movies that was shown in St. Augustine. As we will get to St. Augustine in the next episode of Around Florida. And yes, it is pay-per-view when you put money and seeing movie through viewfinder in the machine, and it's Edison's kinetoscope. That's what people likes, seeing those old movies. In this classic Warner Brothers MGM film, Young Thomas Edison, you will find that Thomas Edison loves inventing things when he was a kid. And he goes in search of inventing things like a light bulb and phonograph. And speaking of which, phonographs is his famous invention that he ever made. Phonographs became so popular that Edison really invented and recorded his first dialogue in the phonograph of Mary's Little Lamb. That's a short excerpt. Take a listen.
Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
There are also cameras and video cameras that Edison also invented. Speaking of which, here is an excerpt from Thomas Edison himself about his famous creation, the phonograph.
I am the Edison Phonograph, created by the great wizard of the New World to delight those who would have melody or be amused. I can sing you tender songs of love. I can give you merry tales and joyous laughter. I can transport you to the realms of music. I can cause you to join in the rhythmic dance. If you sing or talk to me, I will retain your songs or words and repeat them to you at your pleasure. I can enable you to always hear the voices of your loved ones, even though they are far away. I talk in every language. I can help you to learn other languages. I am made with the highest degree of mechanical skill. My voice is the clearest, smoothest, and most natural of any talking machine. The name of my famous master is on my body and tells you that I am a genuine Edison phonograph. The more you become acquainted with me, the better you will like me. Ask the dealer.
Speaking of phonograph, here's an example of Thomas Edison's talking doll in this nursery rhyme excerpt. Indeed, Thomas Edison has lots of researchers to come up with the latest inventions that Edison could create. There's the telegraph machines that produces Morse code sounds. And in the museum, there's a timeline exhibits filled with innovation and inventions and inventions for both Thomas Edison and Henry Ford. Through the years, there are many photos and inventions are on display in the museum, which is easy to tell by guests. And Edison and Ford were used to serve in the First World War. And they did a great job serving to help others. And wow, this exhibit also featured a replica of Thomas Edison and Henry Ford's winter homes, which we will get to it in a moment. And yes, that phonograph up there, which is very popular. And there's a lot of activities for the kids in this museum. And there are so many of them, like looking for latex and hands-on activities seen here. And yes, there's lots of collections of both Thomas Edison and Henry Ford, what they dreamed and what they loved to do in their hobbies. And now it's time to explore the winter homes of Thomas Edison and Henry Ford and the surrounding gardens. Oh boy, this is so getting exciting, exploring the history of Thomas Edison and Henry Ford. Let's continue.
As we head across the street, kind of like a walking tour, I like to focus on what we're seeing as we walk around. And so if you have general questions, by all means, feel free to ask. But again, I like to focus on what we're seeing, okay? Take it apart piece by piece, bring it to his estate up in Michigan. The guy who wrote the Webster Dictionary, he has his house. Edison's laboratory from Menlo Park, as well as from down here. All sorts of neat, kind of historical buildings. And this little picture here shows you that there was a lab behind you that kind of resembled the buildings. It was gray, like the ones behind you, red roof, like the ones behind you there. It was built in 1886, and inside that lab, Edison worked on improvements to his bamboo filament light bulbs. And so he planted bamboo.
We follow the tour guide to Edison's study. It was built in 1928 after his 1886 laboratory was moved to Henry Ford's museum in Michigan. And this is where Edison studied and designed his inventions in this shed. And wow, it remained unchanged through the years since the early 1900s. As we follow the tour guide to explore places like this kind of a fountain, which is differ from season to season, and the first modern swimming pool, which was built in 1910. And wow, this is where Edison and Ford loves to swim at this pool. Next, we get to Edison's caretaker's house. This caretaker house is the oldest structure at the Edison Ford and was here when Edison purchased the property from cattle baron Samuel Summerlin in 1885. This Florida cracker-style building was used by cattlemen as they drove their herds south for shipment. Edison expanded this building, adding a kitchen, garage, and chauffeur's quarters. Edison's caretakers lived in this building year-round, even in winter and summer. And yes, visitors can explore the caretaker's house with art galleries and even a place where they reflect and they reminisce how the caretakers lived here. And now that we're done exploring this caretaker's house, it's time for the main attraction.
Residence here in Fort Myers. And then if you do look to the right, there's a nearly identical building. That was the guest house. So main house, guest house. You thought you were generous with a guest couch or guest bedroom, an entire building for his friends.
Yeah.
This is called the Edison's Seminole Lodge, and it was remained unchanged through the years. Thomas Edison first visited Fort Myers with his friend and business partner Ezra Gilliland in March of 1885. Edison, already a successful and famous inventor, was eager to find a warm escape from the cold winters at his New Jersey home. This library, where Edison looked up some books and spends most of his time reading and thinking, as he was a dreamer and doer of what he could invent things. Edison outfitted his winter estate with 13 electrolyre lightning fixtures. It's steam-powered, and that phonograph in the library was popular. This is Edison's master bedroom, where Thomas and Mina, his wife, rested here, and they had great dreams. And this master bedroom that reminds them of the rich and famous, as guests discover something new every day. And yes, that Edison's light bulb, it was famous. In his study room and in this living room where he and his friends in Gilliland gather together. Speaking of Gilliland, we head into Edison's guest house next door, where Gilliland used to live. Years later, Gilliland was moved away and was never seen again. Nevertheless, Edison loved inviting his guests over to spend a night or two at the guest house. This is the dining room where Edison and his children dined together, and his guests dined together as well. Boy, this is a classic dining room of the good olden days. And they love to have fun, as this kitchen next to the dining room, that great chefs loves to cook some dishes to Edison and his guests.
Down, Mr. Edison, he pulls up, and Charles is about to ask for help when Thomas Edison stops him, and he's holding up that little tarpon that you saw over there. Yeah, he says, "Charles, I did it, I caught a tarpon." And Charles said, "That's not a tarpon." And Edison looks at it, "Well, sure, it's a tarpon. Why do you say that?" And then he kind of turns his boat around and goes, "Well, because this is a tarpon." And apparently Mr. Edison didn't think it was that funny. He wanted his thrown back into the river. Didn't want to keep it. There's a board game on the writing table there, Parcheesi. Maybe you play.
Yes, the patio, which Edison and family and guests enjoy. This room is Edison's music room in the guest house, where Thomas's wife, Mina, is a pianist who loves playing tunes on the piano for Edison and his guests, and his family and his relatives. They love dancing, they had a good time, they even play music on a phonograph, also known as the record player, for those good timers talk about. And now that Thomas Edison talks about is done, it's time to move on to Henry Ford. This shed has lots of Henry Ford vehicles over the years. Boy, I loved exploring those good old vehicles, which you can easily find in car museums nationwide. But this vehicles here at Edison Ford Winter Estates would remind you that good old-fashioned driving is very old-fashioned. Henry Ford loved riding on vehicles, and so is Thomas Edison, his friend. Together, side by side, they love testing out new vehicles before distributing them in the marketplace. Ford's models were really old-fashioned in the 1920s by Ford Motor Company. It is filled with excitement. Next up, we get to Henry Ford's winter estate next to the surrounding mangroves. This is Henry Ford's kitchen, where chefs cook delicious meals to Henry Ford and his guests, even his best friend, Thomas Edison. This is the Ford's maid's room, where his maid, rests for the night in this room. And Henry Ford has his secretary that she resides in this room. And of course, Henry Ford wouldn't have a room without his guests. This is where guests stayed in this room for a night or two, where Henry Ford and his best friend Thomas Edison and his guests gathered together in this living room, where it also has a piano that a pianist comes and plays for Ford's guests. On the back seat of Henry Ford is a popular tune, in which it is a song about Henry Ford himself. And wow, Henry Ford's winter home is so beautiful. Now that the exploration of Edison and Henry Ford's winter homes are done, those beautiful gardens surround us, and the stepping stones, which led to a beautification of the surroundings of Fort Myers. And now, as we walk back down past McGregor Boulevard, we head back into the museum for a garden shop and the one thing that is very important in this attraction is Edison's laboratory. This Botanic Research Corporation laboratory is where Thomas Edison invents things like I told you. And it is research of all the things that he invents, like a light bulb and lamps. That's electricity. And he and his workers designed and invent things that science could do. And wow, it even has machines that does the work. And Edison and his workers designed and created light bulbs, Edison style. And wow, this lab really takes you back in the good old days. They process chemicals, and there's even a dark room in the lab, like producing photographs in the dark. And this will remind you that all of this stuff is Wurka. And yes, it even has lab offices for Edison, his workers, and secretary, working days on end. Edison Ford Winter Estates, a very popular attraction in Fort Myers, Florida. So whenever you're in Florida, and when you're in Fort Myers, check out this attraction. Oh boy! It looks like exploring Edison Ford Winter Estates is so much fun, but already we are running out of time. So thanks for watching Around Florida. And don't forget, if you want more information, we'll give you the link in the descriptions during the credits. So, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you next time here at Around Florida. See you next time! Explorers, be sure to become a fan at facebook.com/DragonAncientProductions and view my videos, and subscribe to the Keep Moving Forward Films YouTube channel. And for more information about Edison Ford Winter Estates, visit www.edisonfordwinterestates.org. So, I'll be seeing you in the next Around Florida episode. See you next time. On the next Around Florida, we will explore Miami attractions like Coral Castle, located near Homestead and Florida City. We'll take a cruise to see the Millionaire's Row homes of the rich and famous. We'll even explore wildlife with all kinds of animals in Safari Adventure. And we'll explore Wings Over Miami Air Museum, located at Miami Executive Airport. Join us next time in Around Florida.